This program, of course, is presented by Pro Wrestling Illustrated, the most widely read, widely sold, and respected wrestling magazine in the world today.
This is the Pro Wrestling Illustrated podcast. I am your host, PWI senior writer Al Castle, with my co-host, PWI contributing writer Brian Solomon. How are you, Brian?
I am holding up as best as can be expected, Al. I hope you are too.
Yeah, as we were just saying before we went on, I mean, what a different world from when we just last spoke about a week ago. And at the time, we were saying the same thing from the week before that. So obviously, just strange times we're living in, both in the wrestling world and in this kind of general life. And we're going to be talking about that here in a moment. I mean, this is typically the biggest news period of the year leading up to WrestleMania now, under 2 weeks away from WrestleMania. And just because of all these circumstances, in some ways, I can't remember a more newsworthy WrestleMania, as strange as it will be. And we'll talk about all that in just a few moments, and all the other implications of, obviously we're talking about the coronavirus and what it means for pro wrestling. And then later on this episode, hoping to talk to none other than Ricky Morton, one half of the Rock and Roll Express, somebody I've been trying to catch up with for a long time, doing a lot of phone tagging, a lot of texting for months now, and reached out earlier this week figuring he's got to be home now. And sure enough, he is. Little did I know when I reached out to him that he's going through his own health issues with news that came out yesterday of him having a bout with Bell's palsy. So I expect we'll be talking about all that, how he's dealing with this whole coronavirus issue, and his and his partner's very unlikely a comeback, being one of the hottest tag teams in the wrestling business here in 2020, well into his 60s, obviously as part of the National Wrestling Alliance, and they're obviously taking it on the chin as well with this whole coronavirus, as is just about every promotion, but a few are still up and running. We'll be talking about that in a moment. Real quick, let's talk about the latest issue of Pro Wrestling Illustrated. I got mine in the mail a couple days ago, something to do while I'm stuck at home. It's got AJ Styles on the cover, and it is the Decade Awards issue, AJ Styles being our Wrestler of the Decade, best wrestler as voted by you, the PWI readers, of the 2010s. We talked about it here a couple of weeks ago. Just like we do the Achievement Awards for every year, we've got those categories for the best of the decade, whether we're talking a Wrestler of the Decade, Match of the Decade, Tag Team of the Decade, and so on and so forth, all here in the pages of the latest PWI, the June 2020 issue. But so much more in this issue, too. Sometimes I don't know everything that's in the issue until it arrives in the mail, and lots of cool stuff. Obviously, my hot seat interview with AJ Styles, talking about his last decade in the pro wrestling business, but a lot more, too. There is a feature here on Tessa Blanchard, the reigning Impact heavyweight champion, features about Dana Brooke. 25 under 25. This is fun from a new writer who's joined the PWI team. The young wrestlers who will lead the sport into the future, a fun list, kind of like Forbes 40 under 40. We've got the 25 under 25, a fun read, and a lot more, all the usual columns, features, a fun issue. And again, because it is the Decades Awards issue, I think especially collectible. We're obviously only going to do one of these every 10 years or so. So go check this out, pwi-online.com. Brian, do you have much of anything in here?
I believe I don't think I have anything in that issue other than my name and the masthead. So
yeah, we're giving you more work though these days, aren't we?
I know. Actually, I'm going to be doing. I'm really honored to be doing it, even though it's going to be so weird this time. I'm going to be doing the WrestleMania Real Winners and Losers article.
Oh, that's a fun one.
Yeah, so I'm going to be paying very close attention to that show, and I mean I would have been anyway just because of the bizarre circumstances, but I'm looking forward to doing that because that's an article that I have read, for years and years, for as long as PWI has been doing it. So I'm psyched to be giving it a shot this year. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, we're putting that issue together now. uncertain times for sure. We weren't even sure if a week ago whether we were going to be running that, obviously, or a week and a half ago, because we weren't sure if there's going to be a WrestleMania. And I got to say, even up until right now, I couldn't say I'm 100% sure, but it's certainly looking like we're going to have a WrestleMania. So there's a bit of a scramble here. What do we do in case we don't have a WrestleMania to be covering in the pages of the magazine? But at least for the moment, it looks like it is all systems a go. You did another thing for the magazine, something brand new that we just introduced, or at least brought back. Why don't you tell folks about your video editorial?
Sure. So it's part of the newly relaunched email version of the Pro Wrestling Illustrated weekly newsletter, which longtime fans probably, I know I remember it from back in the day, and so we're bringing it back. And as part of it, I recorded a video editorial in my sort of bunker-like basement. So if people watch it, it looks very apocalyptic when you see it. But it's talking about it's talking about the thing everyone's talking about, which is, what's happening with WrestleMania and how is it going to be different? Why have they made the decision to do it instead of postpone it or cancel it? So it's basically my thoughts on that, on how it's going to play out, particularly with some of the storylines. Like I mentioned, the whole Drew McIntyre thing in there, which I think is the biggest heartbreaker of all, because I feel like this WrestleMania is probably meant to be his coronation, as like the new guy. And how is that going to play out with an empty room? Like, is it gonna fail because of that? I hope not, but I guess we'll see.
Yeah, it's a lot to consider. And as you touched on, yes, the Pro Wrestling Illustrated Weekly is back. When I was a kid, and I didn't get the PWI Weekly, I had to subscribe to it, and only in the last couple of years have I been able to pick some up. I got some on eBay. I think I got some at a convention. And again, for like the wrestling magazine nostalgia buffs, they're just the coolest thing in the world. And whenever I talk to some of the old time writers, I'm always fascinated about that project in particular, because it's not as if they didn't have enough, work on their hands at the time, putting out whatever it was, like a dozen magazines, and then another deadline on top of that, putting out this thing every week. And it was and again, this is not what we're doing now, but at the time, just the getting results for live events was this huge painstaking effort. It wasn't like you could, people were tweeting from live shows, and it was literally a matter of like working phones and stuff to find out the results of the card. And I remember one of the ads for the PWI Weekly from the magazine, so it's probably been early 90s, said, it was bragging match results in just 3 days. It's hilarious.
I also think it was a challenge too, if you read it back then, because the style of PWI back then was very different from how it is now. It was very much kind of protecting the business in a way that was done back then, and that was, I always felt like that was an obstacle or a challenge that they had to get around, because the other newsletters didn't care about that,
Right.
So they had to find a way to be creative and innovative and interesting and do it in a way that actually respected and protected the business. So I thought it was fascinating. I'm glad to be a part of the new version of it. So if people want to kind of see me and hear me pontificate and watch me wear my beautiful new PWI t-shirt, then definitely check out the first video editorial. I think it's being posted very soon, right?
I think I got mine in an email earlier, so I think it's out there now. So yes, and we touched on it last week. This is kind of another sign of the beginning of the Kevin McElvaney era. I should call it an era.
Well, we'll see if it's an error. You can watch it.
We'll see if Stu committed an error here. But nevertheless, we touched on it last week. And again, with everything else going on, I feel like it's kind of been buried. But Stu Sachs, our longtime publisher and editor, announcing his retirement coming up in June. So we'll certainly miss him, and we'll talk about that a lot more in the coming weeks. But Kevin making his mark early on with a few different things, and this is his latest project, the return of the PWI Weekly. And sounds like a lot of fun. I hope it helps get the word out, spread the news that we're still here doing good, important work. So go to pwi-online.com. You could sign up. It's an email newsletter. And while you're there, certainly subscribe to the magazine. If you want to just buy one issue the latest issue, you can do that. You could have it delivered to your home or immediately download it digitally to your computer, your phone, your laptop, your mobile device, whatever you like. The longer you subscribe, the deeper the discounts over the cover price. I mean, really a steal, well over half. Or right around half, I think, the cover price. So you definitely want to go that route. Again, PWI-online.com. I guess I always say dash, and I might be scolded for that. I don't know if it should be hyphen online, but I think you guys know what I mean. Either
English teacher, I would tell you to say hyphen. So
hyphen, you're right. There's a difference between a dash and a hyphen, right?
Yes, there is.
Yes. Okay. I gotta change that. Hyphen online. I wish we could just get rid of the whole thing, but nevertheless, until we get rid of that hyphen, PWI-online.com. And while you're there, Brian mentioned it. You can also pick up the Pro Wrestling Illustrated T-shirt. Go to ProWrestlingTees.com and you could pick yours up. This is the iconic red and white shirt that many a wrestler wore in the 80s and 90s, even though you can get it in a lot of different colors. So definitely something you'll want to pick up if you are a fan. You can send us an email here at pwipodcast@outlook.com, specifically for the podcast, or any other concerns, questions you have, you can send to pwi@kappapublishing.com. What else? Twitter, Instagram, @officialPWI. You can find us on Facebook as well. I don't know if we're going to be talking before WrestleMania. We'll probably try to squeeze in another show before then, but I plan to be live tweeting WrestleMania. That'll be a lot of fun. And what else? Subscribe to the podcast, iTunes, or wherever you get your podcast. Please leave us a kind review. We appreciate it. And I think that's about it. So let's jump into it, Brian. I mean, again, when we were recording with Raj just about a week ago, we ended the show kind of giving our predictions of whether there'd even be a WrestleMania, what it might look like. And I think I went furthest on the limb saying I did expect that it would happen on April 5th, and maybe it would happen in the Performance Center, and it sounded implausible at the time. And the fact is, I didn't go far enough in terms of how crazy it would be. I mean, even I couldn't have guessed. When I said that, I thought it would be a few hundred fans inside the Performance Center, something of an audience. But what we're getting is just absolutely bizarre. WrestleMania at the Performance Center, and I guess they're seeing a couple other remote locations. No fans, broken up over 2 days. So now WrestleMania is Saturday and Sunday, and I think the craziest of all, I mean, they're yet to acknowledge it, but several reports that from reliable sources that they say they've confirmed it, and it certainly makes a lot of sense. They're actually taping it. I think even though it's not going to be on television until April 4th and 5th, word is that, technically WrestleMania is happening tomorrow from when we're recording this. I think the word is that sometime this week, as early as Wednesday, at least they're going to start to tape some of the matches. Again, absolutely bizarre, but also I think pretty smart. All of this is, as we touched on just from last week, this whole situation is evolving, changing so much that I think it's probably a really good idea to get this out of the way as soon as you can. And that way, whatever happens between April 4th, between now and April 4th and 5th, you've got it done. It's just a matter of essentially, popping a tape in the old tape player and putting WrestleMania on. But I think it's probably highly advisable given these very strange circumstances. But absolutely bizarre. I wanted to kind of break it down little by little. Just this morning, right before we started recording, the word came out that the Olympics is postponing for a year. So even the Olympics aren't going to go on this year, and that's not until the summer. And yet WrestleMania is still going on. Knowing the precautions, or at least having some sense of the precautions that are being taken, how, if at all, okay or uneasy are you about the fact that they're still going on?
Well, there's a couple of things here. As you were saying, things are constantly changing. Not to jinx anything, but we don't know how much more things are going to change. There's still a chance that it may not happen. If they decide that if this sort of lockdown thing that's happening gets more and more serious, as it seems to be getting, that could change too. Although if they are filming it ahead of time, then, that could be one of the reasons why. Maybe they want to get it in the can so that if all of a sudden a decision is made that there's to be, no non-essential gatherings of any kind, well, then they still already have it and they could broadcast it. The other reason that I think they're probably doing that is to sort of, you can take advantage of the fact that there's no live crowd. There's things that you can do that you can't do. Like I think we've seen in a couple of these empty arena shows that they've done, that they'll do some fancy editing, like during the Undertaker AJ Styles segment. There was some definite editing there that you wouldn't be able to do in front of a live audience, where the Undertaker's disappearing and reappearing and things like that. So they probably want to take advantage of that and again make lemonade out of lemons and do stuff they can't do. I also would like to point out that if people listen to the last podcast we did, there was one person who was predicting that they were going to do WrestleMania in an empty arena, and that person was me. So
Yes.
I want to take full advantage of.
But I called the Performance Center.
Yes, you did. But you thought they'd have an audience there, and I said no. They're going to do it Terry Funk, Jerry Lawler style, and it's going to be empty arena, and that is apparently what they're going to do. So here we are.
So we're both totally throwing Raj under the bus. He got everything completely wrong.
Oh yeah, he was he's clueless. I'm sorry, Raj. Better luck next time.
So a couple things on this. First of all, what is it going to look like? What is it going to feel like? We have, I think, something of a sense over what WWE television has been over the last couple of weeks, including last night on Raw. And I think it's fair to say it doesn't give me, and I imagine many fans, a whole lot of confidence about their ability to pull this off. By and large, what we have seen is pre-recorded matches. Obviously, we're not going to get that at WrestleMania, but I do imagine we're going to get a lot of just filler, and maybe that's why they're breaking it up over 2 days. And first of all, I'll begin all this conversation by saying, these are unprecedented times. WWE is being called upon to do something that nobody could have imagined they'd have to figure out, and they're kind of doing it on the fly. They've done an admirable job in a lot of respects of transforming what is essentially a gym into this mini arena that is presentable, if nothing else, on TV every week. And I imagine they'll take more steps to make it look even more kind of exciting, dynamic for WrestleMania. All that said, it's been hard to watch. I mean, it's been really underwhelming. I think we always, on one hand, part of it is just, the fans are such an important part of the wrestling product on a day-to-day basis. But the other hand is, I do think that one of the issues here is that WWE is so rigid in their presentation of wrestling that now when they're being called on to maybe be a little more adaptable and flexible, we're not seeing as much of that. And again, giving them credit for on the production side putting something together, but it just feels like they're still trying to play to a crowd that isn't there anymore, and that's what makes it so kind of clunky and awkward. And the interesting thing here is that, again, while giving them credit for, all right, nobody's ever had to do anything like this before, it's unprecedented, at the same time, we see another company doing it, right? We saw what AEW did last week, and you can, compare and contrast what each of their different resources are. AEW, with the connection to the Khan family, has access to this a much more kind of major league looking arena there in Jacksonville, even though you could argue that's not necessarily a good thing because it's even bigger, cavernous, and more empty. But I do think it looks better on TV. But all that is to say, and I don't know how you feel about this, but I think AEW did a much, much better job working with the hand that they were dealt in putting together a not just well produced, but yes, you notice that the fans weren't there last week, but it wasn't as big an obstacle. And I think in some places they actually used it in their favor, and it added a kind of gravitas to subsegments that you couldn't do with an audience there. I mean, I think of that opening segment with Cody's interview and the Elite in the ring, and I think something about it being so kind of solemn and quiet really added to it. And I think one of the things is that and this is just sort of like the ultimate Vince McMahon WWE thing. It's inexplicable. AEW is not running away or hiding what this is. I mean, I think they're up front in saying, like, here's what's going on. there's a coronavirus outbreak and we can't perform in front of fans, so we're making the most of that. And while WWE is kind of dancing around it, why is WrestleMania 2 nights? Because it's too big for one night. No, it's not. That's never been an issue before. Why was it two? When I was sitting in MetLife freezing my butt off a year ago for 8 hours in the rain, it certainly wasn't too big for one night then. So it's just like they're sort of not even acknowledging what's happening here. And I mean, I guess you can make an argument for that, but again, giving credit to WWE for making the most of this situation, I think it hurts them that you could just flip the channel, you could see somebody else doing it better.
Yeah, it seems like right now they're showing their age, because AEW is coming off as, which they are, the newer, kind of trendier promotion. They're rolling with the punches from a technical standpoint. They're being honest with their fans, or at least more honest than WWE is. And I think that's been a theme since they've started, is just one of the ideas that they're pushing is that they're more kind of frank and direct with their fans. They're not as kind of duplicitous. And so WWE is coming across as very much stuck in their ways. It's kind of like they're doing a show that, it's kind of weird. It's like they're doing the same show that they would have done if there was an audience there.
Yeah.
It just feels really weird. It's comical. Like, I've seen people on social media who aren't even wrestling fans posting about how strange it is. Like they're watching it with like this morbid curiosity. Like, you had Edge come out and do this very passionate promo about, his wife and Randy Orton in front of nobody. So like, the music plays, he's playing to invisible people. He comes out, he's like waving, there's nobody there. He's talking on the mic. Like, why? First of all, why do you need the mic? There's nobody there. Just talk. We'd hear you fine from the camera mic. Like, he's just standing there and he's talking to nobody, and it really takes the drama out of it. It almost seems like, if I didn't know any better, I would think that the WWE TV program has been directed by the same person for 30 years who doesn't know how to change or adapt. I mean, if I didn't know better, I would think that. Yeah, I would think that was true.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that the audience has, and this has been, I think, on a lot of people's, the top of the list of their biggest problems with WWE for years, if not decades, is the whole scripted nature of promos. I think how ineffective that is really kind of amplified by the lack of an audience, where I feel like and this isn't to dump on anybody in particular, but that segment, the opening segment on SmackDown last week with Baron Corbin and Gronk and all them, if you had an audience there, they could have delivered everything exactly as they did, and it still wouldn't have been a very good segment. But I think there is this sort of, everybody is kind of on the same page that we're going to play along, and the audience sort of boos the heel, and they laugh where they're supposed to laugh, and they cheer where they're supposed to cheer, to some extent, right? But when that's eliminated from that, essentially, turning the volume down on the audience, all you get is the acting, right? And it really comes through like, wow, this is really terrible. This is, not even like high school level acting, and I say acting, and it's less the acting than it is the writing. I think, because you really have to be a miracle maker to make much of anything with some of what they were given, and meanwhile, again, you change the channel and you just hear Cody and Kenny Omega and everybody else who's involved, Chris Jericho, some of that stuff, just talking like regular people. Right. And the difference is huge. And meanwhile, you got Gronk. They do that whole bit where, him and what's his name, Mojo, knock over Corbin. And then Gronk grabs the microphone and says something to the effect of, "I'm not an authority figure, so I can't make the match, but I'm going to advocate for a match between you and Elias at WrestleMania." And it's just, who talks like that? I'm going to advocate for a match. It's like, can we just try to be a human being for once? And again, this is not a problem that is unique to these times, but it's a real spotlight is being shined on it because without that audience playing along, you're just sort of exposed out there.
Yeah, it's accentuated for sure, just how stilted all of it is, and like it just makes it seem like people have said it's like weird avant-garde performance art or something, or like some kind of strange theater performance with no audience. Just let them talk. Or you know what they could do is, I'm reminded of, if you remember the promos that they used to do in ECW, where they would be these pre-taped things where it was the wrestler just kind of directly addressing the camera, and sometimes it would be like a 10-15 minute promo, but it was somehow more intense because it was like they were talking directly and only to the television viewer, So maybe that's something that you do in the absence of TV. Just have them do it that way, because boy, I can't get around it. It just looks so dumb when they're standing there in an empty crowd talking to nobody.
Yeah. Well, did you see NXT last week?
Yes.
And I think that kind of is sort of what you're talking about, and it was terrific. It was fantastic. Now, you can't do that every week, and again, it's the latest example of maybe Triple H's vision for wrestling being a little more modern, a little more sensible than Vince McMahon's these days. NXT was really good, and it was just that. I mean, rather than have to deal with the whole awkwardness of an empty arena, what could we put on that wouldn't be affected by the fact that we don't have an audience? Well, let's do these long form interviews backstage and intersperse them with clips and kind of tell the stories long form, kind of documentary style of the feud. Now, again, you can't do that every week. That was a build up to a show that I don't even know when it's going to happen anymore, but it worked really, really well. And on the flip side, now WWE proper, Raw and SmackDown, have also been trying to incorporate more archival footage onto the show, but it's been brutal. There's not a whole lot of rhyme or reason for these matches that they're grabbing and putting on, other than they need to be long and I guess sort of good. But I mean, they're grabbing a match. Yesterday, it was the Royal Rumble the world title match, triple threat, that I don't even remember, from the Royal Rumble 2015. It was Charlotte and Asuka from WrestleMania a couple of years ago. They did John Cena and Bray Wyatt from 6 years ago at WrestleMania, a match that wasn't even there very good. And there's also zero build for them, so they're not even plugging at the beginning of the show, what a treat for you. We're going to give you so-and-so match from WrestleMania. Todd Phillips just throws to the match out of the blue, and then you calculate, all right, it's going to take an hour. I'm going to click away, and maybe I'll be back later. So no rhyme or reason. And again, as much as like you want to give them a pass for having to deal with something that nobody could have anticipated, but I do wonder that rather than put on these lackluster, just dead, empty arena shows, and not even doing very much of them. And I think for every 2 hours, or let's say for every hour, maybe they're doing 10 minutes of content from the Performance Center. On average, last night on Raw, 3-hour show, they showed 2 really long matches that ate up, I would think, at least half of the show. And then with all the other video packages and stuff, again, I don't know that there was a half hour of original content from the arena in-ring stuff. But the problem is that they're doing some of it, and it's really bad. It's not working, and then that is your pitch essentially for WrestleMania, right? So you're putting on this really bad television, then you're saying, well, you're going to get 2 nights of this, 4 hours long in a couple weeks, and whereas if they had shut down to some extent, or at least only did the kind of what we saw with NXT last week, what if the last few weeks of shows or and the next couple of weeks leading up to WrestleMania were all hype by and large, and you could do the backstage interview, but stop doing the in-ring segments and the matches that are just falling flat. Do everything sort of backstage, away from the ring, all of that, and then WrestleMania is the return to in-ring wrestling. and such a curiosity of because think about where our curiosity was a week ago before they did the first show like this. And I remember it was SmackDown that went up first, so it's close to 2 weeks ago. The first Performance Center SmackDown, there was, at least on my part, a ton of curiosity. What is this going to look like? And then they did it, and it stunk. And my curiosity was a lot less for the next Raw and the following week SmackDown. And by the time WrestleMania comes, it's like, oh God, are we going to get 2 nights of whatever, 4 hours of this awful product? Whereas if they had just shut down and then this was the first return to in-ring wrestling, WrestleMania, I think there'd be a lot more interest. Maybe not the best thing in the world if that's where you try it for the first time and it falls flat. But as it is now, I think it's kind of hurting the anticipation.
Yeah, and what they've, I think, forgotten is the fact that if you go back to when they started doing long wrestler promos from inside the ring, that's an Attitude Era thing. That was sort of like a Vince Russo innovation. And it was done to capitalize on a live crowd. The idea was, okay, we've always done these short promos from backstage, with an interviewer holding the mic and there's no sound, there's no audience. What if we had the guys just come in the ring? There's no Mean Gene. They're just standing there and they're talking heart to heart directly to the audience. Like that was something that had never been done before, say like 97, 98, like around that time. But the problem is they're so stuck in that mindset and it's like they're robots. They're doing it now, even though the whole reason that they decided to start doing it was to get the crowd responses. So they should go back to what they had been doing before that because there's no audience to get a response from. And I mean, I'm sorry, but yes, we're all going to be watching WrestleMania, of course, because how could you not? I mean, but we're going to be watching it like watching, I hate to say this, but a train wreck. It's like you can't look away. You want to watch it because you're thinking, how in the world are they going to pull this off? And what it's going to wind up being is an experiment in exactly how important is the live audience to the professional wrestling product. Like you can have a baseball game with no audience there. Like nobody is going to not watch. It's not really going to affect the quality of the game. It's not that big of a deal. But with wrestling, it kind of is because it's a performance. It's like watching a play with no audience or something. And so I think, unfortunately, the experiment is going to reveal that very, very severely. You can get away with it with Raw or SmackDown. I mean, you really can't, but they're doing it. You can do it with NXT, but you're talking about your biggest show of the year, and it could wind up being this very strange, embarrassing kind of thing that maybe they look back on and go like, hey, maybe we should have held off till the summer,
Yeah. Yeah, and over 2 nights. I mean, think about your standard WrestleMania in front of 70,000 fans, and what you see often, certainly the case last year, is they start off hot, right? The fans in attendance, and I think even on watching TV, you're excited, you're up for it the first few matches, and then the third hour rolls around, and the fourth hour rolls around, and the fifth hour, and by the end of the show, you're exhausted and you're done, and you're ready for it to be over. And that's in front of a packed audience and all the production value and the pyro and everything else. Now imagine some of those same problems kind of drawn out where now we've got the 6-pack SmackDown women's match in the middle, or Baron Corbin and Elias. I mean, not anything that folks are going to get particularly excited about. And this is eating up the first few hours of these shows in front of not even a dead audience, in front of no audience. And then, as you touched on, at the end of the night, the coronation of Drew McIntyre, it just seems so counterproductive. But all that said, you just touched on it. Where are you on whether it's a good idea to go ahead or not? And putting aside some of the health issues, which I want to explore in just a moment, but certainly there's an argument to be made that they're going to get a lot more attention for this year's WrestleMania than most years because it's going on and the world is largely shut down, and they're going to go ahead and put on the biggest show of the year. The flip side of that, as we touched on in our last podcast, I don't know where the revenue is coming from, right? I mean, you have no live gate. right now they're giving away the network for free. They lifted the paywall for most content. I don't know if that's going to carry on to WrestleMania. So the money's not coming in. So other than sort of publicity, which I do think is going to be really effective, was this a wise move to go ahead?
I don't think it is. And I think, people may accuse me of maybe not fully understanding the financials and the structure of the business. I don't know. But from where I sit and looking at it, I see no advantage to running it now. Like you said, there's not going to be money coming in from it, really, particularly. There's no pay-per-view to speak of. That might be an argument for it if we were in the pay-per-view days and they were still going to make, millions off of it anyway. I think that part of it is a matter of pride. I think it's this pride thing where they're just like, and we've seen this before where it's like, no one is going to tell us what to do. We operate by our own rules. We do not, listen to anything, and we're just going to do what we want. I mean, look, they'll spin it in a positive way. I can remember after 9/11. I mean, first of all, I was working there at the time of 9/11, and they took such pride in the fact that I believe it was the SmackDown right after 9/11, like later that week or maybe the next week. It was the first major public gathering of Americans since 9/11. And I'm watching it going, and I was working there at the time, and I'm thinking like I don't know if that's such a great thing. Like maybe they should have all stayed home. Like I know you're spinning this as a positive thing, but is it really just because you didn't want to listen and you just wanted to do the damn show and not pay attention, and now you're going to make it into this, oh, we're so patriotic and American? Like, I think that's kind of what's happening again. It's just like, F you. I don't know if you'll bleep that out, but F you. We are going to do WrestleMania. We are WWE. Nobody tells us what to do. The world could end, and we're still going to do WrestleMania. And I think there's a lot of hubris. There's a lot of pride there. Yes, they're going to get more attention, but what is that going to translate to? I think it's going to be a public relations embarrassment.
Yeah. And I think this kind of transition to the next kind of rational question coming out of this, which is the health of their own talent, right? So a week or 2 weeks ago, when we were talking about the fate of WrestleMania, I think a lot of the questions about health concentrated on fans and the notion of, can you really get 70,000 people or even a fraction of that into one place and guarantee people's health and safety? And obviously the answer turned out to be no. But now it's changed so much that, you have elected officials and politicians saying that you should have more than 10 gatherings of 10 people. And even there, the whole notion of social distancing and you turn on the news, turn on Today on NBC every morning, and folks are kept 6 feet apart, or there might be in different rooms. And there's such a obliviousness on WWE's part. You see all the announcers huddled up together as much as they ever did. And obviously beyond that, wrestlers, shirtless wrestlers, just rubbing all over each other, exchanging all their sweat and bodily fluids in a ring. And ostensibly the plan is to do that with however many matches they have planned, a dozen matches over 2 nights. So it does feel like now the concerns shift from the public and fans to talent themselves. And, I'm sure they're taking some precautions, taking temperatures, things like that. The word is that Dana Brooke was pulled from that 6-pack women's match because she may not be feeling well. Rey Mysterio as well was originally slated to be part of the card, not anymore. So, it would seem that they're taking the bare minimum of precautions. But, the other thing you hear from health experts all over the place is that what you're dealing with now or at any given time are the ramifications of actions from several weeks ago, right? Yeah. So, you put all those wrestlers in a ring on over 2 nights in a couple weeks, and God forbid, one of them turns out to be positive, and then go back to their family, to their communities. And what are we dealing with a couple of weeks from this? And that's the other part is, there's so much focus paid attention to folks being paid to WrestleMania. They've got a business to run past WrestleMania and for the next several months. And I don't know right now of any plans beyond WrestleMania, but if they want to get their business back up and running, you think they'd want to take these precautions too. So how much at all should we as observers and WWE itself be concerned about the health and welfare of their own talent?
And let's say not just the talent. I also want to say, because having been a staff member there, they're also going to have all the TV production people there. We forget that. Like, there'll probably be more quote unquote civilians there in the building than talent. With all between the union guys, I don't even know if they'll be there, and the production people, the people in the truck, all the agents, everything, people milling about. You're talking about a few hundred people. I know it sounds like it's impossible, but you're talking about maybe a couple hundred people. And it's not going to look that way because it's going to be the empty arena. So from a visual standpoint, it's not going to look alarming. But you have to think about the amount of people that are going to be in close quarters. There's not going to be any 6 feet apart in a locker room back there. I mean, and that is a bigger problem of all of this, because we're talking about a week, like you're saying, or more before even realizing that you have the thing. I mean, I've quarantined myself from my own kids and my dad because I don't want them, getting sick, and I'm telling them to stay put and not going back and forth between our houses. And you're going to have that many people gathered together in very close quarters. So yet another reason not to do it. I feel like anything that is to be gained by this is outweighed by the negatives. Like, even the publicity and the attention, I think it's going to wind up being negative attention. I think that's going to hurt them post WrestleMania because it's going to kind of make them look ridiculous.
Yeah, it looks and UFC is dealing with it as well, and their president Dana White, birds of a feather, him, Vince McMahon, this kind of alpha male, we're not going to be told what to do, and they just really can't see the forest for the trees. And I know there have been a lot of criticism of the UFC for essentially trying to do the same thing, going on as planned. They were finally forced to postpone a lot of their shows, but they got one big fight that was supposed to happen here in Brooklyn that they're trying to find some kind of international location for, to not have to pull the plug on the fight. And when they've been criticized, what Dana White went out and said, I think on some interview, was he called he's I don't know how it is that we have such wimps in the media covering such a tough sport. And it's just such a bizarre way of looking at things. And I think to some extent we're seeing the same thing out of Vince McMahon. It's this defiance, and this we won't be told what to do kind of attitude. But I think most rational people, what they see is a lack of concern over your own employees and your own talent. And I say that not knowing the full extent of precautions they're taking. So that's an important caveat out there. But at least I think most rational people see them go forth with WrestleMania, and I don't think the response is good for them. Wow, they're so bold. It's, how could you do this? Are you insane? This is not what we're supposed to be doing. You're not helping matters here. That said, the wrestling fan of me, selfishly, yeah, I'm thrilled. I'm going to be able to see WrestleMania in a couple of weeks, and it's going to be unlike any WrestleMania I've ever seen. So there is that. One other thing I want to touch on, you mentioned it before, is another reason to be concerned about what WrestleMania is going to look like. Because it's taped, I do expect more post-production than they usually do. And on one hand, I suppose it could be good in that they can clean some stuff up. They have an ability, really unlike they've ever had, to clean up a match. So theoretically, I would think you will not see a single blown spot, right? Because they have the ability, unlike ever before, to if they blew a spot, to do it again and again and again until you get it right, not having to even worry about an audience. There was that video that went viral from that first SmackDown from a couple weeks ago in front of the empty arena, where when they went, it was a women's tag team match where they went to break. I guess the international feed aired what was happening during commercials, and they all just stopped. They all just stopped and kind of hung out around the ring and waited to be back from commercials, which was bizarre. But you totally understand why they were. I mean, I guess they should have been mindful of the international feed, but why continue wrestling in front of nobody? But the other kind of potential that presents is like, yeah, you could really clean stuff up, which makes some of what we've seen the last few days even more inexplicable, because they had, the opportunity to do it over and over again until they got it right, and some of it still came off so bad. But WWE in post-production can be a mixed bag, and one little thing from last night on Raw, Randy Orton gives that interview at the end of the show, kind of going over his history with Edge, and he mentions, there was the night when I won my Intercontinental title, and no sooner do the words Intercontinental title come out of his mouth that video footage of him winning the Intercontinental title is up on the screen. And in their defense, they're not proclaiming this to be live, so but me watching it, immediately what comes to my mind is like, well, how could they have gotten that up so quickly if they didn't know what he was going to say? And this is the kind of thing that drives me crazy with WWE. And when you hear like that the AJ Styles Undertaker match is now going to be a boneyard match, this is just a recipe for disaster. This is the kind of like thing that they dig into. We could have so much fun with different camera angles and production, and think about those. Oh my God, I haven't even thought about this in years. Remember that
the Boiler Room Brawls?
No, the Randy Orton, Bray Wyatt. What was it? The House of Horror matches or something?
Oh, God, yes.
And where
they destroyed the house or something, or the
yes, no, where Randy Orton grew a beard or shaved between when they were wrestling in the haunted house and he got to the ring. I mean, like that.
How he was able.
Yeah, I mean that absence of continuity, and I mean I could see WrestleMania just being wrought with this, because well, let me ask you about that. What do you think about not doing everything from the Performance Center and this talk of other remote locations? We now know about this Boneyard match. It looks like there might be some street fight kind of things. I mean, is it a good idea to change the scenery up within the show?
I actually think that it is, because I think what they're trying to do, again, is take advantage of turn the negatives into positives. So you don't want to do a lot of those when you have a live audience, because the audience feels gypped. So maybe you do one, like, the backlot brawl with Goldust and Roddy Piper from back in the day and things like that, or like the Boiler Room Brawls that I mentioned with Taker and Mankind. But now that there's no audience to piss off, they could sort of do what they want. And by taking it to remote locations, maybe it looks less strange, ironically enough, because if you're in a remote location, you could say, okay, that's the nature of the match. They're having a match, in this setting, whereas we're just going to have a bunch of matches in front of no audience. So I think that may actually wind up helping the show. I also think, I'm sorry, but what they want to think about doing, what they should be thinking about doing, is cutting down on the number of matches, because if you're going to have these matches that would be so in front of a live crowd, they're going to be painful in front of no crowd. So I think they might want to just look, they're not going to do this, but the 2-night thing is a terrible idea. They should stick to one night and even make it a shorter than usual show and just do the really big matches that people that are like the marquee matches that people want to see. Stick to those matches alone. Like stick to Becky Lynch and Shayna Baszler, Randy Orton and Edge, Brock Lesnar and Drew McIntyre, like those kind of matches, and just leave it at that and cut bait. That's what I would do.
Yeah, I really, really agree. Take the 6 biggest matches, whatever it is, put on as best as you could a strong 3-4 hour show, and you did it, right? You got it in. You can say you did WrestleMania, but the idea of breaking WrestleMania up over 2 nights is not necessarily the worst idea on a standard year, and it's come up, and you saw New Japan do it this year with Wrestle Kingdom, broken up over 2 nights. So there is a model for that and a precedent that could work, and you certainly see the incentive in a standard year where you could sell twice as many tickets to an event. And if you were doing pay-per-views, sell twice as many pay-per-views. So there's something to be said for that. And then you could do your 14, 16 matches, whatever, and break them up over 2 nights into 2 3-hour cards to 4-hour cards. But when, as you touched on, when you're already so hamstrung, right, of not having an audience and not a lot of interest, to deliberately prolong this over 2 nights is just bizarre. I mean, I just can't imagine why you would do it when who is going to complain if Baron Corbin and Elias is off of the show? Nobody. I mean, if you did Edge and Orton, Reigns and Goldberg, Brock and McIntyre, Becky Lynch and Shayna Baszler, and Undertaker and AJ, and maybe that's it, right? I mean, I think you think about the card, that's probably everything you really need to get in. That's it, right? And that's
Charlotte and Rhea Ripley, I think, would be on.
Yeah, I suppose even that one, I think, is expendable of all those, but I guess.
Partly because it's a title match, and partly because it really feels like it's a big part of taking Rhea Ripley to the next level. I don't know. Maybe just because I have a thing for Rhea Ripley. But,
yeah.
I would put it on that list too.
But yeah, I mean, 7 matches, something like that, 4 hours. You might have one of the better WrestleManias in a long time if you did that. So it's just, I don't know. These are decisions made in boardrooms, and maybe they're. And I'm sure there is a rational explanation to some of this. Maybe we're not seeing it, but just as a fan, man, I don't get it. Anyway, thanks so much. I'm sure I hope that we'll be back within the next week or so. At some point, we should probably do some kind of preview and talk about the matches and what we expect and all of that ahead of WrestleMania. And then hopefully we get to talk on. Well, we got to figure this out. Over the last few years, Dan and I would talk right after WrestleMania and record a podcast. This year, there being 2 of them. I guess there's an opportunity to talk on back-to-back nights and figure it out.
I don't know if I like you that much, Al. About that one.
Well, we got to keep our social distance, so might as well do it by phone. Anyway, Brian, thanks so much. I appreciate it. Stay safe. Stay healthy.
You too, please. And everybody check out my video editorial and let me know what you think. And everyone stay home, please.
Okay. All right, guys. And right now, let's hear from one half of the Rock and Roll Express NWA Tag Team Stars, none other than Ricky Morton.
All right, excellent. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this. Wanted to do it for a while. When I reached out to you earlier in the week, I didn't even know about this health scare that you just had that made the news. You dealing with a bout of Bell's palsy? Could I ask you how you're doing with that?
Oh man, you know what? To start this whole thing off, even though I live and eat this business, and and being 63 years old, I still train like I'm 25. But last week I got up there, I go to the gym like 5 o'clock in the morning, and I got up and maybe some coffee, and I took a drink, and it just shot out my mouth. I mean, I couldn't even hold it in my mouth, and I went and looked in the mirror, and side of my face was drawn up, and normally I woke my wife up. I said, "God, you're gonna take me to the emergency room." I thought I was having a stroke because nothing like this has ever happened to me. I felt great, and man, they took me to the emergency room. They put me in there, which is cool. And then when the doctor first looked at me, he said, "I think you got Bell palsy, but we're going to check," because he said, "Man, your blood pressure," and they put the dye on me, run me through the heart machines and all this. I said, "God, man, you got a blood pressure is like a 22-year-old man. Your heart rate is perfect. Your heart, your veins are great, and it's Bell palsy, and and they said it's brought on by stress. So, the married life, you're always stressed. No, I'm just kidding, dude. I really don't know. But, huh?
Is it? Have you been stressed about everything going on in the country with this?
I don't know, fella. It might have been. It's it's a lot of things, and I really don't. But you know what a good thing is about, because I know his care. Jim Ross has Bell palsy, and a lot. But under the doctor's care and me taking my medication, it's just about in 2 weeks' time, it's just about went away. I still got a little smirk on on the left-hand side. But before, dude, I couldn't even shut my left eye.
Wow.
I had to wear a patch over my night. And then, but now I've shut it. I couldn't, I can even wink it now. So, but you still feel it in there. I still have that, and I'm still on my medication. So, hold on for a minute. Okay, I'm sorry. I hope you can cut that out.
Yeah, no, it's fine. Is it
right.
when you deal with something like that? Is the paralysis, such that if you touch your own face, do you feel it? Is it a numbness?
Oh no, I can feel my own face, buddy. I can feel it. I never even thought about that, but no, I can feel my face. It was just that, it's awkward, man, because you try to wink and your body won't let it. And I went, holy crap! But like I said, getting through this is pretty cool. And right now, during this time, it really worked kind of out for me because I still depend on wrestling business, dude, for a living. And gosh, and it's hard to go to work like that. But I want to tell everybody out there that I'm better. You can't even hardly tell it now. But you got to see, man, this coronavirus, dude, it's not only the wrestling business, but all entertainment businesses. Gosh, brother, it shut us all down.
Yeah.
And I'm really bad, what is this, like 8 or 9 days right now in quarantine here at the house. Lucky I have a gym to work out in. Got my dogs, and we always kept food in the house. So, I'm like everybody else. You're just wondering.
Where are you?
Beg your pardon?
Where are you located?
I'm in Bristol, Tennessee.
Okay.
And that's one good thing why I like Bristol, Tennessee. We're a country town, fella. We do have, I think they said 30-something cases here in town. But, I live up in the mountains. There's nobody around.
So you
which I just did. I just went to the post office because I had to pick up and mail bills out. They still come no matter what. So, but it's cool. Got my dogs here, my wife, and my youngest boy, Kerry James. I don't know if you have met Kerry yet. He's, I have 7 children. He's the youngest son of all. He traveled with me. Like I used to travel with my dad. My dad was a wrestler and a referee and in the business. And I was a second generation, and he's planning on being a third generation. So we're working on that. And just, I'm just excited to go back to work. I'm telling you, when you used to been on the road for 6 years, it's hard to sit in one spot for a while right now.
Yeah. When you hear, when you start to hear the news of all these shows being shut down, the NWA, where I know you're working a lot these days, canceling up and all their events, did you think at first this is an overreaction, or were you on board right away that this is the right decision to make?
Well, buddy, it's the right decision. It's the right decision. They did shut everything down. Let me tell you, dude, I still depend on wrestling for a living. To me, it's a great big football kick right in the ass. Excuse my language. But it did. I mean, it's, I didn't make the millions of dollars. I paid the road for a lot of guys to do that. I paid the road for a lot of guys too. But, but I'm still out there. But don't get me wrong, I have no regrets. I love who I am in this business. I love what I do. And you was talking about NWA. Man, what an organization. From the moment I walked through the door and talking to Billy Corgan and David, man, what a business they got and what minds. And it's cool, when you're and you got to look at Billy, he's a great entertainer, a successful rock star. And our business is similar to the same thing. So he sits there and he writes great music. But let me tell you something, I can write some great wrestling. I'm waiting for the one opportunity to get that one chance to, because I got a lot to show the world, buddy. I got a lot to show the world. This wrestling business is still alive more than ever. Ideas that I like to put together, ideas that I like. And, And not only, Robert and I had one of the best years we had in our life in this business. And I've been at 63 years old. AWE, Ring of Honor, New Japan, my love, the NWA. Then, got put in the Hall of Fame 3 years ago. It's really bad to the bone. And what I really miss, is all the big shows that was going to be in Tampa. And, but they, it was a good decision to shut them down. But, but a lot of guys like me and all of them, we still, we depended on that week, and it's gone by. Crockett Cup has been canceled, and everybody's taking a little butt kicking right now, but some of the companies can afford it, and some can't.
Do you worry
on
whether
independent promotion? What's that?
Do you worry whether the NWA can? I mean, they
no,
talk about
no, buddy. They got you got it's it'll come around. There'll be a lot of people, I think, because it's a great product, man. It's a great product, and the guys that's in the office there, they really got a good mind on their head for the business, because I watch, and don't get me wrong, I watch WWE, and I love WWE too, but it's getting to a point where everybody looks the same. You really have to look to see what wrestlers in the ring, or listen to the name, because they all look alike. They all do the same thing, and that's one of my things. I have a thing there I'd love to do for WWE, because I know it'll work, and I know it'll draw one of the biggest pay-per-views ever. But that's me talking, and somebody else might think it's a bunch of bull crap. But they never gave me a chance. It's hard for somebody like me to go in there, because it's like I'm treading somebody else's water. But I got it. My time will come, and when it does, I'm gonna blow it out of the water. You hear me?
Yeah. How you made your name, you and Robert, into NWA 30 plus years ago, and obviously this new NWA is looking to play on some of that nostalgia. The look is very much the same.
I understand this, and I'm telling you the truth. They only meant to mark us in for one show. Mm-hmm. And look what happened, God. And don't get me wrong, buddy. It was everybody. The ratings went way up. Yeah, you hear me? The pay-per-views, whatever. It's whatever they was hoping for pay-per-view. Man, it did, I think, 10 times that. And and Crockett Cup was going to be a major part, but we were going to blow it completely out of the water. But the coronavirus came in, and it's nothing that nobody can do about it. But when this gets over and everything's cleared, here we go again, fella.
Do you worry about being in the ring? And obviously everything's on a break, but whenever things get rolling again, whether it's a month from now or 2 months from now, it's going to be on your mind. I mean, of all the things that people could do, I imagine one of the things that is probably the least safe in terms of transmitting this would be wrestling, right? I mean,
it will be, buddy. But and I watch the news and everything, and I look what's going on, and they're telling people it'll be this long. But you know what? It's going to be longer than that. They're going to have to find a cure for this coronavirus before they even do anything. And I don't know how long that'll take, but they're going to have to, because you just can't, all right, it's free to go now, because then the whole country's going to shut down. And I'm not a politician, but I think that the president's making good decisions right now. They're still fighting like hell, and I don't. That's why I quit watching the news. Jesus Christ, I mean, do something that helps everybody. That's just a bunch of bullshit. So, but listen, man, and I'm sorry. I have my wife is hollering at me. I got my grandkids here too. So, but what I was going to say to you is, if anybody's out there, every Sunday, we have been at 5:05 on School of Morton, have a YouTube show that comes on. It's all the guys from my wrestling school. If you get a chance, check me out on Twitter, Real Ricky Morton, Instagram, Babyface Ricky Morton, School of Morton, which I said you come on and watch. I think we got a bunch of tapes in the can that we taped over the summer that we will be showing at 505 because we had our last live show at the school last Sunday, but we didn't have no crowd. We did the same thing that WWE and NXT and AEW did. But it's great. I love this business, especially love the wrestling fans. We got all different kinds. And and don't get me wrong, dude, I love you all. And, man, thank you for having me on your show.
Absolutely.
And,
thanks.
And you take care of yourself, and hope to see you not far from now.
Absolutely.
Okay?
Thanks so much.
Thank you,
Be well. Take care of yourself.
You too. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.